Hi, in this cast on, I'm going to show you how to cast on, for example, if you're knitting two sleeves at the same time on a magic loop. So I've got two different colored yarns, one for each sleeve. Obviously, you'd probably be using the same color. And I'm not going to cast on as many stitches as you might need. Let's say if you need 60, I'll probably just cast on 40 for the example. You need obviously your needles and a cable. You need a long enough cable to do the magic loop so that when you're knitting you have two loops coming through. So if I'm knitting across and I have my working yarn here, I have one loop here and another loop here. All right. Most of the times a pattern when you're doing this, they'll ask you to do the long tail method cast on. You can do that, or you can do the German twisted cast on, which I prefer. It gives you a bit more elasticity than the regular long tail cast on. And like I said, I'm going to do 40 stitches. So I just like to wind my yarn around my needles to make sure I have enough. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And I can just go ahead and double that if I want. And that's for 40 stitches. So I have enough of my tail yarn, and now I'm ready to cast on. I'm not a huge fan of slip knots, so I don't usually do a slip knot. I'll just start like this, press my needle down, and then just form a loop around it, and that counts as my first stitch. Now the long tail cast on is you come in through the hole that's created here. You wrap the yarn around from the index, bring it back through the hole, and take it off. So that's, whoops, there we go. So I come in under through the hole there, grab the working yarn, bring it back, and take my thumb out. 2 stitches. So that's a long tail cast on. The German twisted is slightly different but similar. So instead of coming straight in, you want to come under both, come over the top inside, then you grab the working yarn and go back through, take your thumb out. Let me do that again. I don't go in the middle straight away, I go under both, bring it over, bring it down the middle. So now I'm here, I'm going to come and grab my working yarn. I just wrap it around. And now I want to come back forward, and my thumb can just kind of lift the work over and I let go. Let me do that again. I go under both, through the middle, bring it forward, grab my working yarn, bring it forward and under into the thumb, and let go. And I'm going to do, if I needed to cast on 40 stitches, I'm only going to do 20 right now. So 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, I should have 20. Let me just make sure. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Perfect. So now I'm just going to push that down, and I'm going to move my blue yarn over to the right, and I'm going to grab my green yarn, and I'm going to do the same cast on, and I'm going to cast on 40 stitches in this case. So again, I like to make sure I have enough yarn for my cast on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Pull it off, fold it in half, and for 40 stitches this is enough. So I want to make sure I cast it on the same needle I used to cast the blue, not the other one, on the same one. Okay, so that's important. And I'm just going to go ahead and cast on 40 stitches. Two. I find putting my index here to hold the first couple of stitches really helps, otherwise they tend to fly off. 4, and I'll see you in a few seconds. Okay, I think I've casted on my 40, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40. So I have my 40 stitches of the green, 20 stitches of the blue. So now I need to add my second part of the blue. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and slide my first 20 stitches all the way to the other needle tip. Whoops. And this is where one wishes they had more than one hand. Okay, so here we go. I've pushed it all the way to the other needle. My working yarn is on the wrong side. It's not on the needle tip, it's on the end connected to the cable. So that's exactly what I want. And my green is on this tip. So I'm going to put my blue tip down, and I'm going to now separate these stitches so that I can start working them in the round. So I'm going to go right in the middle, and so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So that's the middle. So I'm going to slide this down onto my cable, and where my middle is, I'm going to pull my cable right through and fold this in half, just like that. So now that I've done that, I'm going to, it's very messy, I'm going to bring all my work towards the tip so I can see better and I can show you better. My green yarn is on the right side, so I'm just going to go ahead and put my green working yarn on the right and my blue working yarn on the left. It just makes it less messy. Okay, so I have my needles with their tips facing to the left, my blue, which is the first sock or first part of a sleeve that I casted on only half of the stitches on my top needle, my other 40 stitches divided in 20 and 20 on the cable right behind the blue. So I just, at this point, I'm going to make sure that all my stitches in the green are facing in the right direction. So they're all facing inside. There isn't a twist in my stitches like this where I have some facing inside and some facing outside. I want to make sure they are all facing in the same direction. This will avoid having a twist in your work. It is very important to pay attention to this. Once that's good, then I can put them down and those are ready to be worked on. For the blue, I'm missing my other 20 stitches. So I'm going to go right ahead, and just as they are now, I'm going to go ahead and cast on the remainder 20 stitches. So I'm going to take my slingshot position again, right where it is, and I'm just going to go ahead and just cast on my bottom needle, not my top needle, on my bottom needle. I'm going to go ahead and cast on the 20 remaining stitches. It's very important that when you're doing this, that when you're here, you try and close it up as much as possible so that it's as close as possible to the other needle. There will still be a little gap, as you can see here. There will be a little gap, and as you knit the rows, that gap will disappear. So it's okay if you have a bit of a gap, but try and pull these 2 strands of yarn as much as possible to tighten it as much as possible. So again, now I'm going to cast on 20 stitches onto my bottom needle. The first few are a little tricky just because it's tight in there, but it's worth the effort. And again, you might find that the long tail method is easier, especially for your first time. You might want to try that. And as you get more comfortable, you can go ahead and do the German twisted. It's just, it gives you a little bit more flexibility, but ultimately they're both good cast-ons for this. All right, so now I have 20 stitches on this needle, 20 on this needle of the blue, and I have 20 green and 20 green. I'm ready to start working knitting in my project. Now, if you've never knit in Magic Loop, you're probably going to think, okay, great, start knitting. How? It's a little confusing. I want you to think of a clock, and we're going to be turning our work constantly clockwise. So I'm here and I'm going to turn my work clockwise. So now I have my tips facing the right. My working yarn is coming out from my top needle, and I need to start working into my bottom needle. So one thing I strongly will encourage as you're working through this, you will have 2 different balls of yarn. I have 2 colors, but yours will probably be the same color. Make sure you take the time to switch them around. In this case, my green yarn's on my left side, so I'm going to grab my green ball and put it on my left side. I'm going to take my blue ball and put it on my right side. It'll avoid the entanglement and the mess that can be created. It takes 2 seconds and it's really well worth it. So now I'm really ready to start. Like I said, my working yarn is up here, and I need to start knitting into my bottom needle. The way we're going to do this, because we're working with two of them at the same time, is I'm going to knit across the bottom blue, then knit across the bottom green, knit across the top green, and then knit across the top blue. And that's one round on each pair. So I need to pull my top needle out. So for that, my left hand's going to hold on to my stitches so they don't come with my needle. So I'll just go right ahead, hold my stitches, and just pull my top needle out and bring it around to start working my bottom needle. The first couple of stitches, you want to pull nice and tight to make sure you close the gap. And one more time, make sure all your stitches are facing in the right direction. You don't want something twisted creating a loop in your work. You want to make sure all your stitches in the same direction. Now that I'm ready, I'm going to start, and I'm just going to knit across. Make sure you use your working yarn and not your tail yarn. I've done that a few times. It's not fun. Okay, so I just come and just start knitting. And I'm going to knit across those first 20 stitches, pulling this first stitch nice and tight and snug against the cable to try and close that gap as much as possible. As I pull, I then put my thumb on it to hold that tension so that it's tight, so that when I come and wrap it around the next stitch, my thumb stays there holding that tight tension, and then I release and I pull it nice and tight here again. Once I have 2 stitches, it's pretty well anchored. So I can just come ahead and do the rest of the row. So I finished the first 20 blue stitches on the bottom. I'm going to push these down on my needle, always keeping the loop here. And I'm going to come and push the green stitches up to my needle. So kind of like it's their turn to be worked, so they can come up for their turn and the blue can wait. And it's the same principle. It's just make sure your stitches are all facing the right direction. Take your green working yarn, make sure it's your working yarn and not the tail yarn. Wait, which one is it? So it's this one. So you want to make sure that you have your working yarn in the right position. And the beginning is always a little finicky until you get the hang of it. So now I'm ready, and again, the first couple of stitches, I want to make sure I don't leave a big gap. I want to make sure I let my needle come as close as possible to the cable so that I can close that gap as much as I can. My thumb holds the tension. I come and bring the next one. And there, I've got 2 stitches. It's fairly secure. Now I can go ahead and knit the next 20. All right, I've now finished my bottom 20 green, and I have to, remember we had the bottom and now the top. Now I have to knit the other side. We've done the bottom, I just need to knit the other side. So again, we turn our work clockwise, always clockwise. And I have my working yarn on my top needle, which is where I want it to be. I'm going to bring my blue yarn to the left side, green yarn to the right side, and I'm going to pull my bottom needle out this way. I'm going to pull it towards the left side so that I can get my tip to come onto my stitches, because I've already worked these stitches. Now I need to work the stitches down here. And again, I hold onto my stitches and I very carefully pull my top needle. I pull it out, flip it around. I push the bottom stitches on and get ready to start working them. Make sure, just for the first couple of rows, you always want to make sure your stitches are not twisted. You don't want to have a twist. You're not trying to create a Mobius cowl here. And you're going to go right ahead and just knit across the 20 stitches. We're going to do that for the green. Again, pulling nice and tight here. The green and the blue. And once I've done that, then I would have finished a full round of knitting on both sleeves or socks or whatever it is that you're doing. Let me get there and I'll show you. I have two colors, so it's easy for me to see. You'll be using the same color, so make sure that when you finish one, you change your working yarn, because sometimes people can get really carried away and just continue working with that same yarn, attaching the two different things. So make sure you don't do that. Make sure you do say, oh, it's a different piece, so I need to use the other color or the other yarn to make sure I don't attach my two projects. Again, I want to make sure my stitches are all facing the right direction. I take my working yarn and I knit across the 20 stitches. So there we go. That's my first round. I'm going to turn my work clockwise and do my second round, and so on and so forth. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. After, you'll see there's still a big gap here, and that's okay. It will start getting smaller. By your fifth row, this will have disappeared, the big gap, and it will disappear into the fabric once you finish your project. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, even though there is a gap there. And remember, like if you want to remember which is your starting, you could put a marker here so that you know that this is the start of the round for both parts. So you're starting 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's one round. And then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's another round, and so on and so forth. Remember, turn clockwise, push bottom needle in till you get to the tip, and then pull your top needle out, and you're ready to start knitting again, pulling tightly between these edge stitches to try and close the gap as much as possible. All right, I hope that was helpful.